Let's get started. Um, After having reached out to jurisdiction planners to get feedback on our preliminary forecast, we've incorporated that feedback, and we're just circling back now to give an update. I'm Zach Feldman. I manage the data analytics team that produces the forecast, and I'm going to pass off to Corey, another member of the team, to introduce himself.
I am Corey McGinnis, and I'm a data scientist on the team. And I'll pass it off to James, who's going to be giving the presentation.
Good morning. I'm James Colberg. I'm a data scientist or data analyst on the team here at DRCOG. So like Zach said, this is kind of the follow-up to an earlier presentation that I gave where we were asking member agencies to give feedback on the forecast. Um, so some of this is going to be a little bit of a review if you were at that first presentation, but I'm going to be going over what the small area forecast is, just very high level. What the land use model is, which is what we use to create the forecast. And then I'll get more into detail about how we used your feedback that you gave us, as well as kind of going over where this is going to be presented to the public, where you can see the forecast. And there's a few different ways you can download that data and interact with it. And so just real quick, if you're not familiar with DRCOG, uh, these are some of the roles that we have here in the region, and this forecast specifically falls under the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, and is going to go into be an input for our travel model and the RTP, the Regional Transportation Plan, which is a big product that the MPO produces. So the small area forecast is a forecast of population, households, and jobs out to 2050, and our base year is starting with the Census 2020 base year data. And we forecast at the block level, and then that's aggregated up to different geographies. The TAZ or block group is going to be kind of generally how we're going to be looking at it today, and then also up to municipalities. And like I said, it's the input for DRCOG's travel demand model, and it's also an input for the regional housing needs assessment. So the small area forecast starts with county level forecasts from DOLA. So we call those county controls. So our forecast perfectly matches those forecasts at the county level, but then obviously the small area forecast, we go into like a lot more detail geographically about where those population and jobs and households are going to land within the counties. And we use a land use model called Urban Sim, and that's the model that actually allocates growth down to the smaller areas. So Urban Sim it's a micro simulation model, and it's designed to represent the behavior of households, businesses, developers, and sort of model the real life interactions that those different agents would have. And it runs on an annual loop. So we run it, annually out until 2050, with in each of those years, different changes happening between firms and households moving, new households being added into the region and where they're going to choose to locate, new construction, redevelopment, all that kind of stuff. And so just a very kind of high level um, overview of the steps that happen within one modeling year. Um, we age the population, in the region, and then we add new households in to match with those county control totals that we get from DOLA. We build scheduled developments, which are sort of known developments. The model isn't choosing where to build these are just forced to be built. And so these are things that are like already under construction or like in the very, very final phases of planning, and we know they're going to be built. We have a household relocation step that kind of models that people move around within the region. And then finally, the model itself will choose where to build new units. And that's kind of constrained by zoning and different, natural features of the geography, like where there's water bodies and parks. And then once those new housing units are built, the new households that we added back in the earlier step now get placed into house, either into new households that were just built or into, currently vacant households from the household relocation. And then finally, we resynthesize the households and population, and that is a new step that we've added. Essentially just means we sort of like recalculate all of the demographics and characteristics of each household, sort of as households age, they're going to change in different ways, like income or how many cars they have, things like that. And so these are the two steps where the member agency feedback was really important. So I'll get more into detail about how the feedback was used, but it affects these two steps. And then, so to get a little more into detail about how the model chooses where to build new housing, is every census block has an assigned capacity for households and jobs. And like I said, that comes mainly from zoning. And then also, like I mentioned earlier, from land that would never be developed, stuff like parks and open space. We also have subscription data sources, CoStar and Zonda. And so we get a lot of data from there about future growth in housing. And then CoStar has commercial real estate data. And then finally, a really important place we get this information from is from you all, local jurisdictions. So like I said, the scheduled developments are sort of the known developments, stuff that we just insert directly into the model that comes straight out of CoStar and Zonda. And it only includes projects that are either under construction or very close to begin construction. We also use sort of farther out CoStar and Zonda projects to update capacities as well. And so that's going to also sort of, to affect what places that maybe aren't zoned yet. There will be data in Zonda about future projects. So here are all of the jurisdictions that submitted feedback. So we got 105 comments from 12 jurisdictions. And you can see on the map kind of where those comments specifically referred to. So a pretty good, spread throughout the region of feedback. So again, thank you for anybody that participated. This makes a big difference in how accurate the forecast is. So based on the feedback we received, we adjusted the capacity of about 2,800 blocks, and we added 169 scheduled development projects, and that added up to be about 7,400 units. So those are kind of projects that we added in on top of what we already had from CoStar and Zonda. Places that, for whatever reason, weren't in that data. And I think how capacities affects it's sort of like the ceiling in a block. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the model is going to build up to that ceiling. Obviously, it's ultimately constrained by county controls. So if there's only so much growth within that particular county, and there's plenty of capacity throughout the county, the model will choose where to place that growth based on basically past trends that we estimate. And so based on your comments, we either increased or decreased those capacities to kind of adjust what you all thought was realistic. And a lot of this applied to areas with PUD, planned unit development, or similar zoning types. Those seem to be sort of like the least known about what would actually eventually occur there. So that's very helpful to get that feedback from you all about, what actually maybe is going to happen there. So like I said, we also added in scheduled developments. And so some of the types of projects that were missing from our data was hotel to apartment conversions, and rehabs and demolitions. And so like I said, these are different than adjusting capacities because these projects are known projects. They're inserted directly into the model. And then ultimately, the model will still have to place households there, but generally, projects that are built do get filled with households. So I posted these links in the chat as well if you want to click on them sort of before the presentation is over, so you have them up. I wanted to just real quick pull up the block group map, because that's going to be most similar to if you use the comment map to submit comments. This should look very familiar. It's almost exactly the same, just the comment feature is turned off. And obviously that's the updated data. And so real quick, just to kind of go through how it works, if you click on this data tab, you can switch between the employment forecast and the household forecast. And there's also some additional layers in here that you can turn on. These were also in the original comment map the same. So you can turn on municipality boundaries, counties, and then zoning. If you want to see the underlying zoning, you do have to zoom in. If that's helpful to see. And then finally, if you click on an actual block group, it'll pull up the estimate, not just for that particular block group, but the municipality that block group is mostly in. Some block groups span between two different municipalities, and so we kind of just picked whichever municipality the block group is mostly within. So you might see some weird stuff on borders of municipalities there, but the data for the municipality is the exact municipality, not sort of like the block groups aggregated up. It's the actual blocks aggregated up, even though you don't see that geography. So there's households. So yeah, definitely, take some time to look through this. If you submitted comments, let me know if you come across anything that's, blaringly wrong or weird. And oh yeah, one other quick thing I wanted to mention is that this time around we used QCW employment from the state for the first time. And so there's restrictions on that data that prevent us from sharing it for really small geographies, especially where there's like a single employer that essentially makes up the majority of that employment for that TAS or block group. So when you're downloading this data or looking on the web map I was just showing you, you might notice that employment is missing for certain block groups. And that's because of these privacy restrictions. The state doesn't want those employers to sort of have their private data shared. So there's 57 out of the 2,300 or so block groups are suppressed, and 200 out of the 2,200 TASs are suppressed. And so in the future, any consultants who use the travel model, they'll still receive the complete data set. They sign an agreement with us that sort of covers all of this. So that won't be an issue, but just be aware of that if you're downloading the data yourself. And that's all I have. If there's any questions, I think you have to raise your hand and I'll unmute you. So feel free. All right, Matt, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yep, there you are.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Thank you, Zach. This is a really cool tool. I'm just wondering, so DRCOG also has a regional housing needs assessment that Echo Northwest published last year. That also has some growth projections out to 2050 broken out by municipality, county. I was just noticing some of the numbers are a bit different between the small area forecast and the DRCOG HNA. Just for example,
Yeah.
like
So
unincorporated yeah, like 78,000 projected homes in the HNA versus I think it was like 95,000 in the small, so like 18,000 more homes,
Hmm.
small area forecast.
Yeah, so that would have they used when they were developing that, they used our old small area forecast. And so I haven't worked much on the housing stuff. That would Zach or Corey might have more to
Yeah.
say on this.
Yeah, Matt, we can provide some context. So we were able to get the updates in from this most recent smaller forecast, but the important thing is if you're trying to compare these across, you need to be looking not at the um, needs assessment, the estimated need, but at the like key trends that has we're really talking about how much growth is expected. Um, the way to think about it is that we are forecasting out based on existing zoning and existing projections from the demography office at the county level. And that's not necessarily where the region would like to be. There is already an existing housing shortage. So ideally there would be more housing units that exist today, and out in 2050 we would also like there to be more housing units than we are currently predicting in our model. The housing needs assessment is looking at how much housing is needed and where might it potentially land um, based on kind of different factors than our small area forecast. Matt, does that make sense?
I think so. Are you also saying that like so the status quo would result in more sprawl than what DRCOG is aiming for with the goals in its regional transportation plan or the Metro Vision?
I think we'd have to do a bit of analysis and define things to be able to say that. I'm not sure that the what kind of measure of sprawl the needs assessment versus the RTP versus our small area forecast would end up with. Um, so yeah, they will be different, but I'm hesitant to call it more sprawl.
Oh, and Zach and Matt, I was just gonna add on a little bit in terms of like why there might be differences between housing needs and the assessment and then the actual households we're projecting. Because we're doing our housing needs at a regional level and then distributing down to the sub-regional and local levels, we're really using a bunch of different metrics to distribute down. And so population is going to be one of those, but we're also looking at employment and other metrics like accessibility to transit that are going to influence where we allocate those housing needs to. So that's just one thing to keep in mind on this sort of mechanical reason that these numbers are going to look different.
And it's like there's a question in the or a comment in the chat, just the housing units on the wildlife refuge might not materialize. Okay, so that's a specific block group, Brody. I'll take a look at that and see what's going on there. I'm not familiar exactly with that area, but my guess is that there might be like one little piece that isn't part of the wildlife refuge within that block group. So even though the majority of the block group is the wildlife refuge and is not growing, there might be just a small area in a corner or something. But yeah, I'll look into that and get back to you over email. Anybody else have any questions? Feel free to raise your hand. All right, it looks like no more questions, so feel free to email if you think of anything later, or if you run into any issues using any of the web maps or downloading the data. Yeah, thanks everyone.